You know, this might come as a bit of a surprise to some of you people, but, I'm a bit of a Sonic fan. I might have mentioned this earlier on in one of my past reviews, but I grew up as a kid who had both a Sega Genesis and a Super Nintendo in the house when I was a kid, and as such I don't have an affiliation with either side of the supposed console war, and I grew up a fan of both Mario and Sonic. In fact, to this day, the concept of the console war still makes me scratch my head. And while my journey with the Blue Blur began innocently enough with the second game, like many people's did, I have stayed a fan of the series through all of its incredible highs and its frustrating lows. As a matter of fact, the very first video review I ever put up on the internet was a review of Sonic 06, and befitting the fact that it was a terrible game, this video is also pretty terrible as well, and has hopefully been lost to the annals of internet, never to be seen by the general populace again. Now, of course, while I'm no longer doing video game reviews, that doesn't limit my options when it comes to Sonic. Much like Mario, he was involved in a lot of other spin-off media, from books to comics to, of course, today's topic, cartoons. And the first one we're going to take a look at is The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog. Produced specifically for syndication, this 65-episode animated adaptation of the first two Sonic games was made by Deke Entertainment, who would go on to do two other Sonic cartoons, and were also responsible for bringing us the three Mario cartoons as well. And yes, I'm well aware that we have all seen the Nostalgia Critic's review of the show and how he lambasted and bashed it, but come on, that was shtick, and he admitted that it was shtick. And let's be honest here, there are plenty of people who love the series, myself included, just as much as there are people who hate the series. Much like anything Sonic related, it can be a very polarizing topic when you talk about this series. Now, don't get me wrong, I would never refer to this series as high art or an important animated masterpiece, but a lot of its detractors seem to be comically missing the point when they talk about how terrible this series is. Yes, it doesn't really thrive on plot, but when compared to the games that it's based off of, this might be the closest adaptation in terms of tone and spirit, especially when compared to its darker cartoons that would come later on. Let me explain myself a little bit. First of all, and most importantly, the series does not worry very much about plot. When considering the original video games, the plot basically boiled down to Sonic and Tails trying to stop Robotnik. And that is basically all the plot here is. Each episode would detail how Sonic and Tails stop Robotnik's latest plot of the day, while at the same time homaging plenty of Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner cartoons. In fact, the animators outright admitted that a lot of their inspiration came from those old Wile E. Coyote cartoons, particularly with the relationship between Dr. Robotnik and Sonic and Tails, which is played much more for laughs and is not really treated at all seriously. Pretty much every episode's plot is patently ridiculous, but it's that good kind of ridiculous, where you just can't help but smile regardless of the fact that you know full well that it's going completely ridiculous. Such highlights include Robotnik trying to age Sonic to an old man, or trying to cover the entire planet in an anti-Hedgehog force field that would force Sonic off the planet. Or one of my personal favorites, trying to go back in time to gather a bunch of mystical Chaos Emeralds that would make him completely invulnerable. You see, what I'm getting at here is y'all take this series way too seriously. For what it was, and trust me, it was pretty comparable to a lot of cartoons at the time, it was just one of those shows that a kid would want to watch after a long day from school or after just waking up on a weekday in the morning. We wanted a show that would drain our brains so that we could deal with the stress of being force-fed information that we would never use again in our lives. And that series did a fantastic job of it. The series also did a pretty good job of representing the characters as well. Sonic, here for the first time voiced by Jaleel White, who would go on to voice Sonic in two other Deke animated cartoons, did a very good job of presenting the character with the type of in-your-face, radical 90s cheese that was expected of him at the time, and has been indicative of Sonic's personality in the games ever since Sonic Adventure when he actually gained a voice. Most of the time, though, he does also portray the softer side of Sonic as the heroic person who is willing to help anybody out in a pinch.
No! Now that's a face!
Then you have Tails, who in this series is treated more as a young tag-along kid, which, again, fits his characterization from the games pretty well. He was treated as a very young kid who didn't really have very much to offer aside from being able to fly with two tails. An ability in this series that would cause a lot of plot holes when it was not really utilized when it should have been. However, he did get plenty of moments on his own to really shine and show off that he was a very capable fighter in his own right, despite his lack of strength and speed, and this was also the first instance in the entire series' history where he was shown to be a bit of a savant when it came to mechanics. That's right, years before Sonic Adventure, this was the series that first established Tails as being a genius mechanic, comparable to Robotnik in that terms. Fridge logic is kind of funny, isn't it? Of course, neither of them can really compare to the awesome comedic might of our main villain, Dr. Ivo Robotnik, who is treated in this series as a purely comedic villain. In keeping with the Wile E. Coyote parallels that the creators drew so much inspiration from, Robotnik is portrayed here as a nearly harmless, completely comedic villain. And to be honest, I really like this portrayal here. Once again, it mostly fits with the tone that they were trying to set with the cartoon, and I think that he was the favorite character for most of the production staff. Not only is there a lot of screen time spent with Robotnik and his two henchmen, almost like some sort of dysfunctional family, but he also had probably one of the best voice actors in the show, the incomparable blues singer Long John Baldry, who did a fantastic job giving him a very deep, very hammy voice that just really fits with the caricature that is portrayed here.
Remind me to award myself the Medal for Excellence in Supreme Rottenness.
Didn't you just give yourself that award last week?
Well, pick up a better one then.
And of course, what would be a bad guy without his henchmen, here in this series represented by Scratch and Grounder, who are actually based on Badniks from the first two video games. They are portrayed as being completely incompetent at almost everything that they do, and to be quite honest, a lot of Robotnik's plans would actually work if it weren't for the fact that he handed off a lot of critical tasks to his robots, who by his own admission are completely useless most of the time. It also doesn't help that, besides being complete morons, they're often competing with each other for Robotnik's favor, often trying to become his quote-unquote favorite, which can lead to a lot of infighting between the two of them that often leads to their downfall. Needless to say, a lot of their antics are where the Looney Tune comparisons come from, which is pretty easy to see, especially in the way that Scratch keeps losing his beak all the time.
Then we can stop Sonic and get the credit! Great idea, Grounder! Oh, I could kiss you for that!
Sheesh! I never knew you cared so much.
They were also sometimes joined by a third robot, Coconuts, who served as the series' literal butt monkey. He was often treated very poorly by Robotnik, and rather than acting on Robotnik's orders, would often go off on his own in an attempt to impress the would-be dictator, because apparently Robotnik does not like him much to begin with. Coconuts, despite the fact that he is obviously smarter than both Scratch and Grounder, though let's be honest, that's not really saying much, was not part of the Supersonic Search and Smash squad, and was often relegated to the role of janitor, toilet scrubber, or